G'day West Coast Eagles fans, welcome back to True Eagle for a review of a truly shambolic game at Optus Stadium. The Eagles are defeated by 69 points. We kicked 8 goals for, and we're lucky that this is one of those games where we actually kicked straight in front of goal because, we've played GWS twice this year, and I felt like last night's, even though the margin was 2 goals better, I think, it felt a lot worse. And I'm trying to work out exactly why that is. I think expectation comes into it a little bit. It's a rough thing to have as an Eagles fan right now. And it seems to pop up at the worst times. For me personally, when I'm expecting us to do well, we often don't. And it is rare that I expect us to do well, to be completely honest. It was a rough night of footy, to be honest. And it reminded me of round 1 against the Gold Coast Suns, where I think there was a degree... maybe not an expectation to win, but certainly an expectation that we could challenge this team and, have a performance that we could be proud of because, as I've said, there has been flashes over the last 10 weeks and more than flashes, probably like prolonged periods where we're playing well and playing good team footy, albeit with some still terrible skills. Last night was a real step back from that point of view. And I'd imagine it is going to be a brutal review for a lot of West Coast Eagles that played last night. I reckon you could count on one hand the amount of players that won't walk away from their review a little bit upset. I don't think I'd feel silly about giving us a chance, to be honest, in this game, because it's not as though I, got to the game and realised, GWS are way better than I expected, and therefore we never really would have had a chance. I think we were just our own worst enemy in this particular game. I think the GWS obviously have a particular brand that is impressive, and when you see them lope the ball from halfback to their forward 50s with absolute ease, we're not the only team they have done that to. They do have an impressive way of getting from one end of the ground to the other, and we saw that last night. I do think it was probably more unstoppable the first time we played it. I felt like last night we truly were our own worst enemy, and had we played anything resembling, much of the last couple of months, then this would have been a much closer game. And in the end, the score flatters us somehow, which is just great. I'm reminded by a time I had playing junior footy. I played a couple of years of junior footy as a kid. I moved around a lot, but I played in Bunbury, and I remember I was a very unspectacular footballer at the age of 10, I think I was, when this particular game happened. But I remember one week, our team had a surprising win. We all played really well. I played the best game I'd played that year, and I remember waking up the following week to go play at the Maris Junior Footy Club. It's amazing how this is burned into my memory. And for some reason, I remember waking up that morning not wanting to go. And I remember, I don't know what it was exactly, probably a fear of having to perform again and not being as good as the previous week. And I remember Mum being baffled by it. She was like, "You played really well last night. What's going on?" I remember us getting to the game, and I remember at quarter time, we were getting slaughtered by a team we shouldn't have been losing to. And I remember it was so bad that even in junior footy, our coach gathered us around and said, "Boys, none of you seem like you want to be here today. What's going on? You've all got your heads down." And there was a sense that everyone was feeling the same thing. And the reason that's burned into my memory, because it taught me an interesting lesson that I've never forgotten. We ended up losing that game. Was that sometimes it's really hard to back up when you've had a performance that you were really proud of. So in that, I suspect this young Eagles group may have learned the same lesson. There was probably a degree of satisfaction with the way we played against Collingwood. I reckon the internal conversation that week at the club probably would have been more positive than negative, as it probably should be for where we're at. And for the first time in a while, we got a decent run in the media with a lot of people giving us credit. So I wonder if that was a factor in us not really wanting to go out there and play last night, because it was pretty evident quite early in the first quarter, and that was the worst part of the game, I'd say. Most of the first half was just embarrassing. The game opens up for us with a very exciting first second. I think Flynn taps it down to Harley, who looks like he's about to have an amazing clearance. He drops the ball really high. That's something I've noticed lately. Me and my dad have noticed that Harley's ball drop is coming from about above his head now, which he really needs to work on that. Either way, the ball gets smothered, a little bit unlucky, goes off Callahan, and Darcy Jones kicks a goal, and we've conceded a goal in 8 seconds when we probably should have had an inside 50. And I remember thinking, well, that's really unfortunate. But I hadn't really spat the dummy at that point. But by the second goal, I had. There was a young West Coast Eagles player, very young, in his second season, who played very well last week, that completely lost me early in this game. I was live at the ground, so I'd love to see a replay to see if I overreacted to this, but it looked like this particular Eagles player walked out of the way of a GWS player running into a goal. So I was fuming fairly early into this game. And that particular player, I reckon, when they review, and my understanding is how they review these games is they get the footage of every single time an individual player has been near the ball or impacted the play, they review it play by play. And I suspect this player will get flamed for almost every one of his involvements in the first half of this game. You know, for me, there's been games, particularly the Carlton game, where the effort and intensity has been the reason we've been shambolic, right? So in the Carlton game, it just felt like there was one team out there for a quarter and a half. And in this one, I think it was different. It was just as bad in a lot of ways, or just as hard to watch. I don't think it was necessarily an effort thing, but the skills were so bad that it was actually pathetic. And I'm talking like just simple, uncontested, dropped marks throughout the entire game. The skill level, the fumbles, we're used to that. We are coming from a low base. I'm comparing that to an average performance there of skills that is not high. And I thought it was absolutely pathetic. Anyway, I started this really hard. I really roasted us after the Carlton game, but this was just so sad. It was sad to watch. The good thing is, I'm not going to extrapolate this going forward. This was the second worst ebb of the season, I would say. The Carlton one probably was just complete inability to impact that game for a quarter and a half. And in this one, it felt like maybe we were trying, but our heads weren't in the game. We weren't confident. And that manifested in our skills, which were just embarrassing for most of the game. But that first half in particular, I remember looking at the score at 19-54 at halftime thinking, 6 goals down, that's not quite a fair reflection of this game. This is very one-sided. And once again, I'll reiterate, I don't think GWS did anything that we couldn't have managed, which is not to say that we should have been in front, just that that wasn't the reason for the difference in the two teams. They were just mopping up after us. That's the way it felt. They certainly have a lot of skill and a lot of quality players that even our best wouldn't have won that game. I know that. But yeah, I was pretty filthy on a lot of West Coast Eagles in this particular game. I'll go through the individuals I think did okay. There was no one that was outstanding, at least off the top of my head. But yeah, for the most part, I think that's one we would love to have back. Or maybe just burn the tapes and forget about this game forever. Looking at the stats is really ugly. We conceded 73 more disposals. That's not uncommon. We gave up 20 more or 21 more inside 50s than we had, which is fantastic. Our efficiency inside 50 actually wasn't too bad in this game, which is weird because watching the game, I didn't feel like we used the ball inside 50 all that well. I'd love to see the stat for how many times someone targeted Liam Ryan, as in with the kick. The kick going inside 50 was towards Liam Ryan. I reckon it might have been double digit. And most of the time it just flew over his head, or in some cases he dropped the mark that he should have taken. Yeah, just frustrating stuff. The clearances, we lost by 8. I feel like we could have done better there. They're not a particularly strong clearance side. The contested ball is probably the worst stat there. 34. That's an annihilation. I think it was 20 at halftime. So, yeah, there's that. I suppose, on the other hand, contested ball can be a reflection as well, not just of effort, but of your ability to actually win a contested ball, and that's probably not great at West Coast now. We are so young. I think North Melbourne actually went younger than us this week because they had Darling and Parker and a couple of others out for their game. But as a side note, our experience dropped massively when we dropped Jaden Hunt for Malachi Champions. So that was the least experienced team we fielded all year, and perhaps the youngest as well. I think the average games experience was 67. So for contested ball, generally speaking, I'm not surprised we're not winning too many of those counts. That actually wasn't the biggest bugbear for me in this game. It was just the meekness of the way, you know, we would use the footy, and then an inability to just mop up our own mistakes. It was just shambolic, wasn't it? Turnovers, we had 13 more than them. What a surprise. Side note, the umpiring at Optus, every time I go to Optus, I'm aware that the crowd does skew your perception and you feel like you're getting slaughtered by the umpires. But I do feel like we're getting cooked at Optus by our own umpires. Well, they're not our umpires. But it feels like this big overcorrection after a few years ago. There was a narrative about how West Coast had a free kick advantage at Optus because of the crowd. Sometimes I feel like these umpires just want to piss us off. It felt like there was a few howlers in this game. Obviously, did not make any difference to the result. But it's just so frustrating. I'm sure you can relate to this. When your team is getting annihilated and the umpires also, it feels like whenever we get a free kick, they wait until the last second before they blow the whistle. Maybe that's skewed by just my frustration in the moment, but I thought we got cooked by the umpires last night. Should we go through some individuals? I have sorted this table, the stats table in front of me there, by most possessions, and that is Liam Duggan. He had 25 kicks, he had 12 turnovers, and yeah, yikes. One thing I'll say is my dad correctly pointed this out. He said that there's a few blokes that continually, when they get the ball, they're the only players to stop and wait 30 seconds for the field to set up before they bother doing anything with it. And sure enough, it usually turns out to be a turnover. The three worst defenders in particular, I think, were Duggan and Kelly for this, taking a mark about 70 metres out and just stopping. And I'm aware that if we move the ball too quickly, we risk the turnover and get burnt on the counter-attack, which is GWS's strength. So there is an argument against moving the ball forward too quickly without intention. But there is a clear trend here of it being the same guys every time. And it is, if it worked out for us once, this slow ball movement thing, last night, I do not remember it. Duggan, Kelly, and to some extent Cripps, who I think probably had his worst game of the season as well, and he's in serious danger of losing his spot. Flicking through some players that I thought were passable is probably going to be a short list, but let's do it anyway. I thought McCarthy and Marek were fine. I mean, McCarthy's played 3 games for us and had less possessions, but it was fine. I still think his skill, that was the first time I'd seen him live. I still thought he was definitely a net positive for us. So lower expectation on a guy in his 3rd game, but I still thought probably one of these players worth mentioning that was decent. Ruben Jimby was really good as well. It took me a while to notice him. I was a bit preoccupied with my general rage, but I think he was playing on Cadman and once again did a really good job. I think Harley Reid was pretty good, to be honest. I don't know what the perception is. I know that he was talked about a lot. I know Toby Green kind of sucker punched him a little bit there. He is terribly umpired, Harley Reid. Don't get me wrong, there are definitely times he gives away dumb free kicks. Like the one against Collingwood last week, he ran about 15 metres over the mark. That's on you, Harley. But generally speaking, the umpires hate him, and it's not making his job any easier. I also think, I say this a lot, but it's so obvious to see that he must be injured. Harley, do you remember how quick Harley was last year? You give him an inch of space and he will be out maybe like Max Holmes, just distantly past everyone. Now you can see him running for the ball, and he is one of the slowest players on our list currently. I would draw the comparison to Elijah Hewitt, who's in ripping form. I don't think Harley's anywhere near that. However, there are still many things that Harley Reid is doing consistently that he wasn't doing last year. Last year he had Elliot Yeo, and I don't know this for sure, but I'm going to guess that Harley Reid was not our number 1 clearance mid last year, but he won 7 clearances and had 7 tackles in this game. He had 24 possessions, he had 5 marks, and I think 5 inside 50s as well. Statistically, that was one of the only passable performances I thought from this particular game. And I thought he battled hard. I think he's hampered at the moment. I really hope that perhaps he is learning about what it's like to play AFL if your body's not quite right, whether that's his fault through preparation or the preseason injury or a combination of both. Either way, I'm optimistic that Harley will be learning a lot from this year, because remember how much easier it was for him last year. This year he's getting his hands dirty, and I do actually appreciate. I thought this was a pretty good game from him. Hewitt was really good in patches and then disappeared, and his ball use was off, but he still won 7 clearances, so yeah, not an amazing game, but worth mentioning. Hoff, I don't know what happened to Hoff in this game. I don't know if he would have been tagged, but it just felt like he struggled to get his hands on the footy. On the plus side, when he gets the ball, he looks really good. And it was clear to see him weaving between traffic there. And look, he had 18 possessions and 3 clearances. Look, it's not terrible compared to what we've seen from other midfielders this year, but I was hoping for a little bit more from Brady Hoff. Job Shanahan, unreal, to be honest. It's so nice to see how quickly he is performing well at AFL level. 14 possessions. How many marks did he have? He had 5 marks and 2 goals as well. And his set shot kicking is a breath of fresh air in this team. I think Archer Reid is very talented, but you just compare Archer Reid's set shots to Job Shanahan, and it's clear to see who's the more natural forward. I think Archer Reid is a good player, but he'll need some time, and I don't think he should be a key forward long term. So Job Shanahan, keep him in the forward line when you've got a player that's able to be clinical in front of goal, and it's not just from his 2 games. So I think he's had 3 shots at goal and kicked them all, but that is something that's known about him previously. I think he's a very natural forward, so that's a huge win. Keep him in the team. We had Malachi subbed on. I think that his stats is ugly. I think he had 6 possessions, 4 turnovers, and only 1 hit the target. Having said that, though, I think you could clearly see how much quicker he was than so many of other forwards. And then that's something that, for a small forward line, I mean, if you compared him to Tyler Brockman or even Liam Ryan in some ways. I think Liam plays higher up the ground a lot, but Noah Long, some of these other small forward types, certainly Owies. There is something different about Malachi with his agility and lateral movement, and I like that he took the game on. There was a couple of moments he'd like to have back. There was one where he probably should have had a shot at goal and he passed it and didn't work out. And then there was another one where he loaded up for goal and I think it was just marked in the pocket, to be honest. But considering the average performance of West Coast Eagles in this game, I am pretty happy to just keep Malachi in the team. I'd be more inclined to drop one of Tim Kelly or Jamie Cripps from this particular game. It was ugly. I'd say maybe let's keep Malachi as a sub. I think there's a bit to work with there. I saw some love for Harry Edwards online. I just didn't really notice him. He had the 2 marks, 10 possessions. I'll defer to others. What did you think of Harry Edwards? Let me know in the comments. That'll do for individuals. I don't know how much to really analyse more out of this game. I've given it a good 21 minutes and it was just awful. The good thing is, well, I say good thing, but I think that the truth is we don't need to labour on this performance too much. We have a young group that is severely underprepared for AFL. Just the experience, the small bodies, the talent distribution, the lack of midfielders. I think we've punched above our weight pretty well for the last couple of months, with a couple of exceptions. And last night was just awful. It was awful. But we can shrug it off. I really do think that. It doesn't really matter long term. It hasn't shaken my faith in McQualter. I think McQualter's done a good job of employing a game plan, motivating the players. But you can't do that with any team for 24 rounds, let alone a particularly young one. So it hasn't really changed my long-term view, but it was just hard to sit through, to be honest. I was disappointed. I think we're better than that. I think that's what it comes down to. I've seen us be better than that. That was not our mean average performance. That was well below. So we'll cook them on the review. I have no doubt about that. And that's all right. We've got a tough game against Port Adelaide next week. I'm going to be in the air because I'm a dickhead and booked my flight home accidentally at halftime of Port Adelaide West Coast. So I'll still be here to do the review, or at least I'll be in Melbourne by then. And I'll do some more content throughout the week. So let me know things you want me to do videos on. I'll do my best. I'm here for family time as well. And also let me know your thoughts on this game, because I was particularly negative. I chatted to a few people around the stadium throughout the game and everyone was of the same opinion. It was just pretty diabolical, but it doesn't change the long-term view. It was just awful, to be honest. So anyway, let me know what you think, Eagles fans. Up the Eagles. I'll see you in the next one.